Hello there everyone. In today's tutorial I'm going to show you how to make these cross wirework earrings. And this is what mine look like. So you get this teardrop shape with beads kind of on the inside, and then I've used the wire to create this cross shape pattern all the way along the edge. So it gives a really nice effect when the earrings kind of hang from your ear. So kind of something like that. You'll get the X shapes, cross shapes there all the way along the edge, but then also a really nice look from the side. So that's what they look like here, and obviously using contrasting beads and wire really makes that pattern there stand out. You can also make these different to these. Now these are kind of quite bold in the size because I've used 6mm rounds and then 0.6mm wire there for the crosses. You could also make them finer and more delicate, so maybe use 4mm rounds and then 0.4mm wire there for the crosses, but that's completely up to you and personal preference. But if you want to learn how to make these earrings, then stay tuned. So these are the materials that I'm going to be using for my earrings. Now what I have are two different gauges of regular round silver coated copper wire in this case. The first one here is a 1mm gauge, and this is going to be the base wire really, so the structure of the piece and the strength. And then here I have a 0.6mm. This is what we're going to use to add the decoration with. And then we'll also need some beads as well. So the ones that I'm using here are these 6mm rounds. These specific ones are some magenta dyed quartz gemstone beads. You can also choose whatever you want to. And then also we just need our earring findings and some jump rings to put the things together. So let's get all the materials ready and let's get started. So then to cut the lengths of wire that we'll need, first of all I have one length of the 1mm gauge, so the thick wire, of about 30 centimeters. And then of the 0.6mm wire here, I have one length of about 90 centimeters. We just need this one length for the whole piece. So to begin with here, I just want to grab the length of the 1mm wire, so the thick gauge, and what I just want to do towards one end, about 5 centimeters in, or about 2 inches or so, I just want to kind of put a gentle bend into it. So don't use your pliers or anything. This is just really to have a starting point, but then also to stop the beads from falling off while we're working with it. And then take the length of the 0.6mm wire here, and first of all we need to find the middle of this. So what I'm going to do is put both ends together, so roughly like that, and then down here where we have this little loop, you could say, this is where the middle is. So just keep hold of that. Then I'm going to grab the 1mm length again. Then we need to attach the 0.6mm length to the 1mm length. So I'm just bringing it kind of around like this, and then grabbing hold of that midpoint, I'm just going to wrap this length of 0.6mm around about 1.5 times really around the base wire. And then we're going to have the two lengths of 0.6mm coming out from there, and we now have the two lengths that we need to work with. And this is, like I said, going to be the starting point. So now we also need to start adding in some beads. So I'm then going to add my beads one at a time here, and I have my wires ready. So what I'm going to do is on the open end of the 1mm gauge, so the thick gauge there, I'm going to add my one bead and have it come all the way down to right after the wrap that I did with the 0.6mm. So just like that, and then just we need to hold on to this. The first one or two beads, they can just be the most fiddly because there isn't that much to hold on to. But just do your best, hold on to that, make sure the bead sits right close to it. And then I'm going to start with my bottom one here. It doesn't matter what length of the 0.6mm you start with, as long as I would recommend you stay consistent. I'm going to take the bottom one here. It's coming from below, if you hold the piece like this, below the bead, and then I'm going to cross it over the top of the bead, over towards the opposite side, so over the top of the wire as well, base wire. So you can see it wraps around that bead kind of at an angle. So going from the bottom to the top, and then on the other side of the bead here, to cage it in, I'm going to wrap around the base wire one more time, and then have this wire come out basically where we took it from to begin with. So it's coming from below, wrapping over the top of the bead, wrapping around once, and then coming below again. And then we need to take the other one. So that's from the top, bring that across here. And then how you hold the piece is really up to you, what you feel most comfortable with. But then bring this from that side over the top of the bead, and now this is crossing over the other wire that we wrapped over the top of the bead, which is then what creates that X shape, you could say. And then to the other side, and now we need to wrap around once again on the base wire, and you just do that on top of the other wrap that we've just done. And if you need to throughout as well, you can always adjust the wraps over the top of the bead to make them as even looking as possible. So wrap this around an extra time, just literally on top of the first wrap, just to not add too much bulk to it. So that's the first one. That's one full bead added now. And then for the next one, I'm going to add a new bead to the open end of the base wire. Let it come all the way down, and what you can always do as you go is use the new bead and hold on the other end and just press against each other, just to help make everything as tight together as possible. And now basically what we're going to do is repeat. So I'm going to make sure that I always hold the X's upwards so I can see what I'm doing, and so it all becomes even. So again, I'm going to start with my bottom one, bring it over the top of the bead to the other side, and then wrap around the base wire once. So the wire again comes out below, just like that. And then we need to take the top one in the opposite direction over the top of that to create the X shape. And then wrap it around the base wire as well, but on top of the other wrap, to kind of just secure it in place, but also get a bit of space in between the beads. So just like that, and you can adjust the X, like I said, as you go. It's kind of better doing that as you go if it's a little bit wonky, and then just press it against each other. And then what you want to do now basically is repeat this until you reach the end and add all the beads that you want to. So I've now reached the point here where I'm going to add in the final bead, and what I've ended up with is 15 beads in total, and this is going to create about a 5.5 centimeter teardrop shape, or a bit over 2 inches. So say if you wanted it to be larger than that, you could always just add more beads and you would end up with a larger shape. And what I would just recommend if you do that is you make the length of the 0.6mm longer that you're going to work with, because obviously otherwise you don't want to run out of that. And then what I'm going to do is with the final bead here I want to add in, that's where I also want to finish off the length, well, these two lengths here of the 0.6mm. So I'm going to first of all just start in the exact same way, make the cross over the bead, start with the first wire, the same one that I started with throughout, and then I'm going to wrap this around the base wire, one full wrap. But then what I'm going to do is do another wrap straight away. So this has 2 wraps now. And then when that's in place, I'm going to then get a pair of flush cutters, cut off the excess, and then just a pair of chain nose pliers here, flat nose, and then I just want to squeeze that little end down, because you'll be able to feel it if you run your finger over it. When you cut off a wire, you're going to have a little end sticking out, and obviously you want to make sure that that's going to get tucked away so that won't catch or scratch on anything. And then we have the other wire, so that needs to come over in the same way, just like this here. And then we wrap around a full time again, and then an extra time. And then what I'm going to do, this is wrapping on top of the other wraps that we just did. Then we need to wrap basically down around the base wire after those bottom wraps once or twice on its own, and otherwise just do the same thing. Cut off the excess once you feel it's nice and secure, and then just tuck away that end, squeeze it in. And then once you've done that, we've now gotten rid of all the wires for the embellishment there. And then what we need to do now is shape this into the shape that we want it to have. And the first thing I just want to do then is just straighten this end back out, and that's why I wanted to only put in a gentle curve there to stop the beads from falling off. And then we have the 2 ends straight again. So then we need to get something we can shape this around. Now I'm just using this multi-shape mandrel here, but you can really use whatever you have handy. You could also just use your fingers to shape this. So just kind of do it freehand, and you can always compare one to the other to make sure they get as even as possible. But then I lay this, the middle of it, on the shape, on mandrel, and then start bringing this around, making sure that the X's are facing away from the mandrel. And then I'm going to bring them around basically until the two ends meet. So it becomes nice and even like that. And we end up with that teardrop shape there. So there we go. And you can remove it. And then you can always just use a mandrel as a guide anyway. And then when we connect the top there, we're going to have the teardrop shape with the little X's or crosses facing away from the piece. Then to connect the top there, what I'm going to do is use a pair of chain nose pliers to first of all put a bend into one of them. So just a bit after the end where you have your wrap, bend this so it goes straight upwards when you put the two ends together like that. And then we need to wrap the other one around that to basically secure the two ends together like that. So I'm holding the piece in my hand, and then I'm going to take the other length and just wrap it around all the way down here. Make sure to make the wraps as tight as possible. So just about 2 wraps or so. I'm just going to go around rather one more time. So something like that. Then I'm going to cut off the excess. Make sure, again, like before, to squeeze in the end so that doesn't stick out. And then we have this length left, which we then need to make a wrap loop with, so we can connect this to our earring finding. So grab my chain nose pliers again, and then I have my piece here, and then holding it flat like this, and then place the chain nose pliers just a bit above where I did those last wraps on the base wire. And then I want to bend this to the side. So you can see it goes sideways away from the piece. And then we need to put a loop in. Now you can either use a pair of round nose pliers or some bail making pliers like this. I have 6-step bail making pliers, and I use the smallest one. That way I make sure that the loops on both earrings become the exact same size. But you can easily use round nose pliers, it doesn't really matter. Bend the tail around the pliers here so you get a loop, and make sure you go around for a full circle. Now what I just want to look at here, I want to bring this wire either around the front or the back, and I'm doing that depending how I did the wraps below there. So look at what direction they're going in. So I know I need to put this around the back like this, because when I then need to start wrapping around below the circle here, you can see we created that circle. I can take my pliers away and go to my flat nose instead to hold on to that, because when I then need to start wrapping this tail around below the circle to obviously wrap that in place, what I want to make sure to do is that it's wrapping around, so when it's done wrapping and I cut off the excess, the two ends of the wire that we cut off, they end up meeting each other, almost as if they would connect again. So grab hold of it there, and then start bringing the tail around, wrapping it to basically fill in that space below the loop. And then, like I said, you'll find that this is now coming and basically meeting up with the end of the wire that we cut off before. So I know I can cut off the excess of this using my flush cutters. Just open it up a little bit. Cut off the excess so that when I go to squeeze down that end, it's going to meet up with the other end. So they're basically going to be going against each other like that. And that way you just kind of make it nice and secure and as seamless as possible as well. So you squeeze that down, and then all that's left to do really is attach your earring finding to here. Obviously what you can just do is your final little tweaks of shaping. What you can then do, make sure to compare them together as well, so they become as even as possible really. You can see there the shapes and the size. Obviously the size is mostly really determined by the amount of beads that you use, so you can just count using the same beads on both of them. But then otherwise, like I said, attach your earring finding and then you'll have your finished pair when you've made your second one as well. So here I then have my full pair, and they'll dangle nicely from the ears like this. So you get this really nice effect of obviously the beads. Now these are really colourful, you can choose whatever you want to use obviously, but then especially if you use a contrasting wire to the beads to really make the crosses stand out there, you get these crosses or X's, whatever you want to call them, kind of on the edge pointing away from the piece. Then you get that pop of colour from the actual beads as well, and it gives a really nice effect from the side. So that's the earrings. So I really hope you enjoyed this tutorial here for a pretty simple pair of earrings, and thank you very much for watching.